panel is we're going to be talking about everything medical. We're going to be talking bio, we're going to be talking med, we're going to be talking about health and the technology that's being applied and how technology is pushing it forward or maybe holding it back in some cases. So we're here to talk to you about biotech and health tech and everything in between. We're going to be making sure you know what's going on, not from just the technology, but from the industries as a whole and what's happening in different regions around the world when it comes to these three areas, as advancements are shifting and changing very rapidly. We already know, and I'll just recap for us, that over the last 8 to 12 months, we've seen a huge rapid acceleration around these three areas. There's been a number of advancements when it comes to technology being applied over the past decade, but specifically here in 2020, the game has changed. And not just because of the pandemic, but because of that digitization we talk about here every day on VCTV, where all of these technologies are converging and they're affecting every industry as we know it all around the world. And we've brought the best and the brightest from around the world, all corners of around the world today, here to share with you what they're seeing as investors, how they're thinking about these industries, what they're seeing, where they're placing their bets, and the advice they have for you on what to keep out and mindful of as well. And before we get started, like we do on every show, welcome and thank you so much, audience, for joining us today. If at any point you would like to be on a show like today and share your thoughts and insights about technologies, industries, and regions around the world, we'd love to have you either joining a panel like our guest today or on a different subject. Do reach out. We'd love to find the right spot for you. Entrepreneurs, we're 2 days away, 2 days away from Q4. 2 days from the last few months of that sprint to the end of the year, the last few months before you jump ahead to the next year or years ahead for your company. This is an incredible time. You're either fundraising, you're launching a product, you're launching a service. It is the time to get out there. We have a virtual stage here for you at VCTV that you can get up on and pitch us in real time as investors, focused on your area, focused on your industry. We'd love to have you not only hear your pitch, but also give you real-time feedback and have you have the chance to pitch our live audience as well. If you're interested, do reach out to the LATOKEN team and or myself, and we'll find the right spot for you. And a big thank you to the LATOKEN team and to Emmanuel for making sure VCTV possible every single day. And with that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. Let's dive in and welcome each and every one of our guests to open up this exciting subject. And first and foremost, welcome to the show, Karsten. It's a pleasure to have you. First time with Emmanuel and I. If you can, a little intro and a little background.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Carl, for your introduction and teeing this up. So it's a great pleasure for me to be with you guys. How did I get into this space? When I went to university, I've got a PhD in molecular biology. I read this one statement that was almost too bold to believe at that time, that the next century, this century is going to be the century of biotech. And it made me thinking. It really challenged my mind what could happen. And frankly, a lot more has happened than I imagined at that time. So since then, I've stayed in iconic biotech companies like Amgen, Alexion, and Roche Genentech, launched many blockbusters that changed patients' lives. I think what really motivates me is making a difference to patients and using science and innovation to change people's lives for the better. And I zoomed in pretty much on oncology, hematology, which continues to be perhaps our biggest health challenge now and for the next couple of decades. And I think most, or a lot of things have been going on in the last couple of years in rare diseases. So that's one of my specialties.
Wonderful. And again, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you. And welcome back, another guest, someone we've had here a few times on VCTV. It is a pleasure to see you again, Raghu, my friend. Welcome back to the show. A little intro, a little background to those who may not know you.
Thank you, Kyle, and hello from Princeton, New Jersey. I've always been interested in the biomedical area. My father was a doctor in the Indian military, and I came to the US to do biomedical engineering, but somehow got into the computer science area and kind of took away on that side. now I'm kind of back in the last few years. Since 2016, I've been an investor and helping advisor in the biotech area. We've gotten into the oncology space. It's like a platform company that delivers to the cancer tumors or to the the lymph nodes. And then I'm also now involved in the infectious diseases space because of COVID. So look forward to having a great discussion here.
Wonderful, and thank you as well, and a lot to talk about in that area. And Julio, welcome back. It's been a few minutes since I've seen you and one of our other guests who we'll introduce shortly as well, but nonetheless, it's always a pleasure. A little intro and a little background for those who may not know you.
Sorry about that. Hi, Kyle. Nice to see you again, as usual. Great pleasure, and thank you, LATOKEN and LATV for the opportunity. I'm beginning to feel a little unworthy of this panel because I see that there are a lot of PhDs and highly educated people. I became interested in biotech, etc., because I can make money. But that's obviously a very low, the type of motivation that you need, is probably not the same as being an MD or a doctor. As an investor, we've invested, or we're advising several companies here at New York Bay Capital. So greetings from New York. And I look forward to discussing our investment experience in the industry, and also what we're planning for the fall, for the rest of the year, and for next year as well. So thank you again.
Julio, I got to say, I'm very appreciative and also just love all the backgrounds that you create every time you're on the show. I mean, you come up with these great backgrounds. You highlight your portfolio companies so well. I'm assuming they appreciate it as much as I do, if not more. But thank you for always doing that. It's great to see that. Devang, welcome to the show as well. It's a pleasure to have you here on VCTV. A little intro and a little background for everybody.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Kyle, as usual, for a very colorful introduction to the whole show. And yes, Julio, great background. I have a relatively staid curtain here. But my background is actually a lot of enterprise software. So actually, both in India and the US, I did a lot of work in different roles in enterprise software. So, computer science, and I think a lot of biotech today is at the intersection of biology and computer science. So I think, at least 50% of that I have formal training in. Regarding venture capital, I really fell in love with the field through formal coursework, actually, while doing an MBA at Carnegie Mellon, is when I actually got my first exposure to venture capital. And it's a really practical course. So we met a lot of VCs in the Pittsburgh area. And that was really the impetus for getting into the field. And, that's where my interest was really honed in venture capital. So my brief career story after those roles in enterprise software, I moved back to India in 2016. I'm based in Mumbai, India. I did some angel investing and advisory of my own in personal capacities. I got acclimated to the whole venture capital ecosystem in India. And then I've been with a firm called Anthill Ventures since early 2018, which is basically it's a fund accelerator model on the lines of Y Combinator. So we invest and advise companies at pre-A and Series A. And I handle the healthcare vertical there. We are closely partnered with HCG, India's biggest oncology chain, in helping companies grow and also in investing in these companies. And looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. And again, happy to have you. And last but not least, the man of the hour, who I also haven't seen in less than 24 hours, but nonetheless, all jokes aside, pleasure to see you again, Anuj. Welcome back to the show. A little intro and a little background for everybody, please.
Lovely to see you again, my friend. Always great to see your face. But yeah, thank you so much for having me back on the show. About me, I'm the founder of Yellow Sapphire Technologies and Atutum. Venturing into healthcare was through Yellow Sapphire Technologies, where we primarily work with fintech and medtech companies, helping them develop their products. Sometime last year, we me and my co-founder were having a discussion around the healthcare sector. We came up with multiple reports that were highlighting the trust deficit that's coming up in the healthcare market. And then that really inspired us to dig deeper into it, not just as an advisor to healthcare companies, but more or less taking in a more active role and then going in head first with the product itself. So that's where we came up with Atutum. We are now launching a personalized healthcare concierge in India to focus on critical and chronic care patients in healthcare sector. Along with that, at Atutum, we are a partner with World Business Angel Forum, which is a G20 initiative to promote entrepreneurship across the world. So helping out other startups coming across as well.
Awesome. And I know that that organization plays a very impactful role in what we're talking about today, as we've spoken about on previous episodes of VCTV. So excited to hear some of the initiatives that you're working on as a collective as well around that. So gentlemen, to everyone here on the panel, kind of kicking things off as you've all kind of rounded this out again, 2020 is really setting the framework or the foundation for not just the decade, but probably much longer ahead. As we've seen this rapid digitization and the convergence of so many technologies, we look at 2020 as this was a defining moment and a change at how we look at bio and med tech as we once knew it. That we've got all this data, now we can start applying it. Here's how we should or where we should be applying it. Here's where technology can play a role and where it may not be, where it not should play a role. With that being said, kind of kicking off today, I want to ask each of you your opinion on where are things currently. We have many investors and entrepreneurs that are tuning into today's show and wanting to understand where is the current state of bio and med tech? Where are things happening? Where are things not happening? Would love to come to each of you for your thoughts. And Karsten, we're going to start with you. What is the current state of bio and med tech from your view and the world that you're in?
Yeah, I think to start with bio, I see in 2020 a continued focus on rare disease investments. A lot of private equity firms, venture capital firms are investing in that area, and here's why. If you look at the unmet medical need in the large indications or very prevalent diseases, it takes in some cases forever to finish your phase 3 studies, go through the regulatory process, and then reimbursement. And many people underestimate the reimbursement part. Unless you provide a significant medical impact and advantage for patients or payers, reimbursement is going to be difficult. So the rare diseases is different because you need fewer patients. That means you need shorter clinical trials, which means you need less money to invest. The hurdle from a regulatory perspective on quality is the same, but in terms of the outcomes, primary endpoints, secondary endpoints, I think there's more discussion with FDA and EMA. And so I think in some, we're seeing that. So one of the most recent major acquisitions, Alexion took over Portola for $2 billion. That again is probably more a rare disease company. Is a good example of the enormous returns that are in this area.
Yeah, and that's just one of many mergers and acquisitions, right? I mean, we've seen a number just this year alone. I see Julio shaking his head as well. I mean, there's a lot that has happened in this. We've seen not just tens of millions, but going into the billions of dollars being invested in this space and in high dollar acquisitions as well. What that means for the future is still to be determined on the investment or on the startup side. It also proves a very attractive market to start building in and not something to shy away from. If there's tons of mergers and acquisitions in the space, start building. There's opportunity, there's gaps to be filled, which Karsten, thank you very much for the initial startup of these insights. Raghu, to you, what are you seeing as the current state of these industries?
Thanks, Kyle. I see that there's a lot of funds flowing into this space, as especially because of the current pandemic year, especially in the infectious diseases space, which used to be a poor cousin before. And not only the vaccine, which is kind of a top of mind for everybody, but things around the vaccine, for instance, adjuvants, which can make it more effective and things like that. There are a lot of SPACs. I mean, many of the IPOs, there have been a lot of SPAC raises. So there's money waiting around, looking for the right companies to merge with. And also, I see that early stage companies are a little bit not as much in favor as clinical stage companies, and especially repurposed drugs, which do not have to go through a long regulatory cycle. So that's what I'm seeing.
Well, and that's actually an interesting fact too, because we've actually seen a number of companies, some very well known, some up and coming, that have been started by kind of repurposing or recycling of drugs. Right, a drug has gone off of its patent, and someone has picked it up and figured out what else to do with it, and created whole new businesses. Right, we've seen him and hers, we've seen Roman, we've seen a number of companies in this space, whether that be focused on health and wellness or otherwise, that are just really taking advantage of these opportunities. That's, it's not just big pharma, for instance, that can capitalize on it. Instead, everybody can. It's kind of a fascinating list if you look at the number of drugs that are coming off protection and those that are going to be open to the public. It's very interesting to look through that list. So definitely recommend it. Julio, to you. Want to come to you on the current state of things, and thank you, Raghu. We'll come back to you on a follow-up in just a moment. But Julio, to you, current state, what are you seeing?
Well, I see 5. I actually wrote them down here. 5 things that I think are interesting as investment material, and it builds on what some of the speakers said. For example, Raghu said FDA approval, early versus clinical, right? You want clinical because early is too early and it takes too long to get the regulatory approval. So the opportunity there is to invest in a company that actually specializes in taking companies through the regulatory approval, because there are always more and more new companies with great ideas, but the FDA is limited, and the FDA has become a bottleneck for the entire industry. Yes, it probably should, but it's the world's bottleneck right now, or at least the world's go-to people. So, there is a company we're working on called Processa Pharmaceutical. It's down there by my shoulder on the left. It's public, but its mission is to help other companies go through the approval process, or to acquire promising drugs and then take them through the approval process, because it's staffed not necessarily only with very bright MDs and PhDs, but with people who know the FDA in and out. So that's one thing. Stem cells is I think very interesting. It's something that has been developing over time. Company up there, Epibone, does stem cells. They rebuild your bones from your own stem cells. Super interesting research, very advanced already in their approval. I would say telemedicine plus is another trend. Telemedicine, everybody understands why telemedicine is interesting in these days of COVID and isolation and being home. But what I call telemedicine plus, such as our company, Oi Health, this is a company that not only does telemedicine, although it happens to be specialized in the Spanish-speaking world, but also delivers medications, delivers kits. It's more than just telehealth, right? It's really a service company that is dedicated to sending to the home everything that you need, as well as providing the medications and the doctor assistance. Nutrition I think is a huge medically related field. That's why we are looking at Keko there, who make nutrition bars. And finally, of course, the entire COVID infectious diseases, this was discussed. Sorrento Therapeutics is all over that. It's a public company. It's been quite a story to follow it. Suffice it to say, they started the year at $2 a share, and they're now at 11. In part because of their success with some of the COVID related. So FDA approval, infectious diseases, stem cells, telemedicine plus, nutrition, all ripe fields for us, and I think for almost anybody who will look at them.
Telemedicine plus is actually a very big industry, and things we've talked about here a lot on VCTV. And I do want to come back to that in just a moment, and it will play on a question I had for you as well, Raghu, because this is something that has dramatically changed, not just here in 2020. We've been talking about it for decades, the idea of that remote presence in terms of medical. And in the past 5 years, we've seen a little bit of it. Past 3 years, a little bit more. 2, 1, again, here we are back at the foundation of looking at the decades ahead, where this looks like it actually may be more regular than not. So I'll come back to you here in just a minute for both of you guys. Devang, before we continue, I want to come to you on the current state. What are you seeing as happening in these industries?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So we are seeing a lot of continuing interest in oncology. Speaking of rapid digitization, pathology is getting rapidly digitized. Probably one of the fastest growing areas where all the traditional ways of doing pathology, like slides or analog reports and all that, is getting rapidly digitized, and all that is selling really well. Startups in that space are getting a lot of BD from hospitals because the whole operations are made much more faster and much more efficient. And to some extent, they're even threatening, I'd say, entry-level radiologists or entry-level people in certain fields, because the whole area is getting pretty rapidly digitized. Others, quote-unquote, evergreen areas of oncology, immuno-oncology is growing rapidly. We're seeing a lot of business plans in that area, checkpoint inhibitors, areas, different molecules or enzymes, just targeting either the innate or the reactive immune system. Some really good research going on there. And a lot of this is coming out of premier institutions, or people coming out of premier institutions like Mayo Clinic or Hopkins, Sanger Institute, Sloan Kettering, or premier biotech schools like Stanford or even IITs in some cases. There's a lot of genomics, genome sequencing for certain kinds of cancers is really interesting. And then, in India, I think a lot of this is coming from outside of in India. In India, we're seeing some growth in adjacencies, like, nutraceuticals for cancers, different kinds of food for different stages of cancer. That's a fairly rapidly growing industry. And then what I describe as non-tech plays, but still in cancer, like there's a company, a really interesting company that just sets up small kiosks at cancer centers, selling wigs and prosthetic breasts. But it's a very simple premise that, when someone goes to a hospital and goes back home after chemo, they don't depend on going to Amazon to buy a wig or a prosthetic breast. They just trust the healthcare provider more and everything in the hospital to provide a complete experience. So they're looking at setting up kiosks in hospitals to sell these accessories, and it's a pretty interesting business idea, actually.
That is very interesting, actually. I want to come back to that in just a minute, but before we do, Anuj, to you, current state, what are you seeing?
Kyle, I've been on the show a few times, and anyone who has heard me knows that I love talking about the market in Southeast Asia and Middle East and in Africa, because I believe that it's a huge market that's been untapped, that's not really been accessed by the Western world, because there's still a culture that a lot of companies have not yet been able to understand. To give you an example, and how that's creating a huge opportunity, is it's creating a trust deficit. There are numerous reports that are coming out that patients did not believe that hospitals acted in their self-interest. 61% of patients actually believe that. Now, when you are going to a hospital for a non-communicable disease, and as is the case in major Southeast Asian countries and African countries, where you are seeing a major drop in communicable disease, in neonatal and nutritional disease, versus almost a 2x increase in non-communicable disease, it's very important for the patient and hospital to have that trust, which is not being built right now. Yes, there are a lot of companies that are coming up with innovative solutions, but until and unless they build that trust factor, they build that right value where a user understands that, hey, I can trust you, and I know you are acting in my self-interest. If I may use a word which we often hear in the financial sector, until and unless you have companies which are acting fiduciary to the users, you will not see a change. A user has to know that you have the user's best interest in mind rather than your own best commercial interest, because we are talking about a life and death situation. And then that has to be the factor for every upcoming startup.
Well, and there's a difference between a business and something that takes care of you, but at the same time, you still have to look back at that as a business, right? There still has to be a way for that entity to live and continue on as well. And so there is a very fine balance to your point is what constitute as business and what constitute as good for the patient as well. And finding that fine line is I think something we're still all working through as well. And so Julio, I want to come back. Oh, sorry, go ahead, buddy. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was saying the word is healthcare. You gotta have care with the health. It is a business, of course. You're absolutely right. At the end of the day, a business wants to make money. But when you're making money, you got to make sure that you are actually delivering the care that a patient wants. That same report that I was talking about mentions that 50% of the patients are not happy with the hospital's cleanliness. So if you're not happy with, if you're going to a place which is literally a swamp for disease with already a non-communicable disease, until unless you take care of yourself of that place, how are you going to take care of the patient?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and that goes exactly to my question. Thank you so kindly for teeing that up. Julio and Raghu, and on the Carson too, I'm going to come to you on this. Actually, maybe everybody, telehealth. To Anush's point, why do I want to go into a location that does not, I don't feel takes care of me? It does not feel comfortable. It does not feel clean in those three examples. Instead, I just want to sit at home. I just want to be on my couch. I want to be on wherever I am in the world, whatever I'm doing, and be able to get that kind of information that I need or that kind of care that I'm looking for. So telecommunication or telehealth, pardon me, plus, Julio, you brought up this term. Unpack it for us a little bit more. Is this something that's coming? Is this something that's actually here? Where are the opportunities for this to really thrive if it's going to?
Yeah, there's no question in a few years, people are going to be very used to seeing their doctor on a screen. Just like people are getting used to seeing their boss on the screen every morning, and just like kids are getting used to seeing their teachers on a screen every morning. It's just going to be a fact of life. It's simply more efficient, and a doctor's time is quite precious. So, you need to dispense with all of the, issues around getting to see the patient. You just need to have them on a screen. I mean, there's various issues that come up. I mean, number one is doctors still believe in sort of meeting their patient, right? At least once, seeing them physically. Most doctors will tell you there's nothing like, a physical examination, and they're very afraid of misdiagnosing something by missing something, because at the end of the day, the interaction with the camera is limited. A lot less information can be conveyed. So, part of, I think, telemedicine plus is the idea that telemedicine is not going to be the end all and be all, but you could see a doctor, but then have all of your subsequent visits through telemedicine. If you don't like to go to the hospital because, in the words of somebody, it's a swamp, you might still have to go once, but it's better to just go once and then limit the number of follow-up visits to, to conduct those at a distance, because once a doctor has seen you once physically, or maybe once a year, a lot of follow-up can be done with telemedicine. So I think that's one way in which telemedicine is going to start making advancements. And there are companies that will actually, such as OI Health, that will take care of, you can choose your doctor. You don't have to go to the telemedicine company's doctor, but a doctor can then contract with a company to do follow-ups, to monitor whether the people are taking their medicine, to monitor certain statistics, right? So I think that the back door for telemedicine to become much more popular is not to the idea that it's going to immediately substitute the doctor or the physical idea, but that it would supplement it, and be very good at follow-up. So, telemedicine plus is a little bit about that. It's also a little bit about procurement. It's a little bit about solving the insurance problem. As you know, this is something that happens in the US, but to some extent in other countries. The whole idea of which insurance do you have, is the insurance accepted? Once you're running a sort of tele operation with an emphasis in technology, you're going to be solving those issues too. the getting paid, facilitating the consumer's experience in terms of meeting their obligations, right? That's something that can also go hand in hand with telemedicine, that can make them really advance the notion that we'll accept your insurance, you don't have to worry about anything, enter it once, and then we can put you in touch with a whole bunch of different physicians. And then finally, we mentioned Southeast Asia. The world is very different. Not everything is like the United States, not everything is like Latin America. But the idea of being able to reach a doctor that's far away is very compelling to people for second opinions. You might have a doctor that lives near you, but there's nothing like, if you believe that the doctors in New York or the doctors in Paris or the doctors in any particular place are better, as long as they speak your language, you'll be able to visit those for a second opinion at any time. And you're not going to always be limited to your local doctor, wherever you live. Those are the keys.
And in a world of remoteness, as we may be living or may not be, short or long, it doesn't matter. But in that new world, that's a great point, right? Being able to keep those things consistent. Oh, we've got the finger point with the background. We see a company up there. Is that Hoy Health? All right. So there's a company for you to choose. So Raghu, I want to come to you on the same question. What furthermore are you seeing with telemedicine plus? And then Carson, will come to you as well.
I agree with Julio. I think there are two components there. The physical part will still be there because of certain things you cannot replace, but concierge model for kind of wellness and care on the front end and also on the back end, post-operative and post treatment kind of things, telehealth can provide that in a much better way, more cost efficient, as well as I think with the technology now you can actually do that very well. And there are a couple of companies that have come up with kind of innovative models here. There's a company called Suquino, Suquino, which has multi-channel support for the telemedicine, not only including the critical care type of thing, follow-up, but also just monitoring, home health monitoring and things like that. They have a separate channel for the medical professionals, separate for kind of the nurse practitioner, things like that. So it's a pretty nice model. You could check that out. Yeah, they're just launching. They've done some very good, already pilots. So that's I think one. The second part about this is that the technology has evolved quite a bit. So there's because the cloud is now available, things that you could not do earlier now, like reaching across anywhere in the world. And Southeast Asia is pretty prominent in my vision as well, because there's a lot of populations that before a few markets used to kind of dominate the investor part at least. But now I think it's become more democratized, and there is huge unmet needs for populations all over the world, including Southeast Asia, which I think are coming up on the radar. So.
Well, and it's just a huge amount of population too, right? There's a lot of people within Southeast Asia, and we've spoken about this around Latin America and South America as well, and Africa, and a lot of emerging countries and areas as well, where medicine and medical access is just becoming more accessible as well. And when you start to open up those doors, and kind of what Julio mentioned is there's a lot of back office stuff, which we'll say for this conversation aside, you open up a whole new world. I mean, if you're in an emerging country and you're now able to, where you have a cell phone and you're now able to connect to a doctor, you're now able to connect to a practitioner when before you couldn't. I mean, that changes the game for your quality of life, let alone just the technology that brings to it. I mean, this is a whole new world that we're starting to see. And back to Julio's point, right? If you're in one country versus another and you want to talk to a practitioner that may specialize, which is a whole nother conversation, or is just someone that you fancy for whatever reason, you now have that ability. And we talked a little bit about this around, go ahead.
Yeah, alternative medicine, which is not as advanced in the US. That's another area where I think a lot of talent is available in countries such as India and China as well. So.
I mean, not to take it away from technology, but just think about we talked about food tech yesterday and just changes of our food from farm to table, the process. And, think about changes of diet, right? And how you may want to get advice on that. And those are things that now you're going to be able to bring up. But I'll pause there so we don't go down the wrong rabbit hole. Let's bring ourselves back to technology. Carson, I've seen you shaking your head, putting your finger up, smiling left and right. You got a ton to talk about. So go ahead. I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on what Julio and Raghu said. If you asked 6 months ago, physicians and patients, if they would talk to each other on a screen, they would have said impossible. Yeah, and now we did some market research in the UK, and about 30% of the physicians that we used to see face to face use telemedicine right now. Just the level of change is unheard of. Now, of course, there's many challenges, and I think these challenges could be opportunities. The first one is hospitals don't like Zoom. You can't use that platform. Physicians may have not the same platform as patients. There has been many patients who needed to have their paper prescription in their hand to go to the pharmacy, hand it to the pharmacist, and with the insurance and all those processes. But, I think maybe there's a blessing in all this, that the current situation has accelerated things that should have happened years ago. The direct electronic, for example, transfer of patient data and prescription data to the pharmacy. But let me take it even further. I think there has been these almost opposing forces. One that was all about patient privacy, and all patient data are, the patient's ownership and must never be shared at all. But then the other side that wants to apply artificial intelligence to make sense of the data to the benefit of patients. And I think now there's a real opportunity for investors, for startups, to recognize this is the next largest change in healthcare that can happen. The digestion of these data, finding a way that it is compliant, that it protects patients' privacy, but that in the insights it generates is for better diagnosis, for better treatment, avoiding side effects or drug-drug interactions. We could be in such a better place in the next 10 years, and it's perhaps the biggest opportunity that we have.
Couldn't agree more. I see Julio's unmuted and Devang as well. And I'll just say, I couldn't agree more. We've talked so much about the power of data and what it can become. And just from my background of being in the Internet of Things and wearables, there's been years, almost a decade at this point, talking about the idea of actionable insights. We have yet to truly see that, and just starting to see pieces of that. And to your point, Karsten, this is one of the greatest opportunities. If you can figure out how to harness it and protect it, that's the key, protect it. When and where necessary, because we're starting to learn what may or may not need to be protected and how. But if you can take care of that data and put it against something to tell me something else that I need to know, or my doctor or practitioners, et cetera, that changes the game. To your point, we bring in what Devang was talking about around genomics and the idea of now being able to kind of tweak things a little bit on not just the type of medications that we may take, but ourselves as well, right? If we have some anomalies, being able to change those, not necessarily today, but in the near future with all this data. And we have so much data. I mean, almost an overload of unnecessary data at this point, some skewed, some not, just expired data, as we've also talked about. Is data is great, and if you don't use it, it kind of has an expiration date. So nonetheless, we have so much data that we can leverage and use for the better, and we just need to start doing that. And with that, I want to come to everybody around the table for other opportunities as we hit the lightning round here just shortly. So Raghu, I want to come back to you, and then Julio, I see you've unmuted, and Anuj as well. Raghu, what else are you seeing as areas of opportunities that people should be paying attention to?
I think you just came to it. The data whole zettabyte revolution here. There's so much data being created, and there's a conflict between privacy versus retention, right? Data retention for whatever e-discovery litigation type purposes. So that hasn't really been addressed. I'm actually working with a company that is creating what I would call a data vaccine. Just like you have kind of preventive stuff and then therapeutic stuff, to take the COVID analogy, and then there is a vaccine. In the cyber data protection space, you don't have that. You have mostly preventive kind of firewall type perimeter security, and then there's reactive stuff like incident response and mitigation. But the vaccine type of solution is not available, and this company SplitByte is actually able to provide that by it's not just encryption. They take the data and then kind of split it, randomize it, store it away, kind of like a Harry Potter Horcrux, right, if you will. Like you can't just breach one location and get at the data. You have to be able to kind of compromise multiple locations. So that's, I think, data privacy and data protection are very big areas because of this, what is being accelerated, right? More data is flowing into the cloud, which is great that it's all primed up, but you need to take care of it, make sure it doesn't get breached.
Absolutely, and that goes back to Carson's point of platforms, right? And some don't like using Zoom, to some do. Some use Microsoft Teams. Some use whatever they can to just communicate. And so, if you've got all these different platforms, all these different practitioners using all of these different things and collecting all this different data, it's going to multiple different locations. You've got to figure out how to consolidate that. And then you have to figure out, once you've got it consolidated, you can do something with it. How do you explode it or fractionize it? So like you said, it creates an additional layer of privacy. And Devang, I see you shaking your head. You know something I don't, so I'm coming to you. Where are you seeing the areas of opportunity? And I know you want to weigh in further on Raghu.
No. So, you spoke about IoT, and I've also been in the IoT industry. And you're right, aside from, predictive maintenance, the actionable insights have not been so great. But I think in medicine also, from predictive maintenance on an MRI machine or big machinery inside a hospital, the industry I don't think has had that much innovation. But I think the data aspect of it, when IoT exploded in many industries like manufacturing, there emerged industries out of dealing with the data. Like there was a slew of startups just in data normalization. There was a slew of startups just in data cleansing. And there was, so many startups around data analytics. And then another whole set of startups just around data presentation. So, 4 sub-industries around data emerged as an outgrowth of the growth of data in IoT. So in the same vein, the promise of genomics is, one of the promises of genomics is CRISPR, right? As we all know, once you work around the ethics, you should be able to cut and paste nucleotides to cure a person. Now you start from like a biopsy, and that, you just imagine all the data cleansing, normalization, substrings, concatenation, and presenting, all that. You see so many industries just emerging from preparing and sorting through data for genomics and CRISPR. So I think it's going to be a huge opportunity, and it dovetails what happened in the IoT industry for other verticals.
Absolutely. And Anuj, to you, I want to come to you around this areas of opportunity, and then Julio will close out with you before we get to the lightning round. Anuj, what are you seeing as areas of opportunity, whether it be in Southeast Asia, India specifically, or just globally to some of the organizations you're a part of?
I think I'm going to echo some of Raghu's and Carson's point here. They mentioned that there's a need for concierge medication, because while telemedicine in itself is a great revolution, it's really helping us connect with a lot of patients that did not have access to healthcare otherwise. There is going to be a need for a concierge where once that telemedicine consultation has happened, the next step can be taken place, which is making sure that they are getting tested, that they have access to MRI machine, that they have access to CT machine. If there's a need for a procedure, that they can travel to a state or a city where they can get that treatment. Likewise, highlighting the importance that while we are generating a lot of data, it's also equally important to make sure that we are preserving that data. Southeast Asia, Africa, Middle East, these markets are notorious for not maintaining their medical records properly. I have n number of users who have never maintained their health records. They go see a doctor, and then within probably a day or two, they lose their medical report. So it's very important to make sure that, just like as I talk about financial sector, that you have to get a user and make sure you're not getting them just for the sake of a number or just for a sake of a small ticket size, but actually educate them with the importance of that data that they are generating. It's not just alphabets and numbers that they are coming across, that they are creating for a doctor to witness and to examine, but it's something that actually has to make sense to them as well. And that's where technology comes in. That's where the new startups that are coming in have to innovate, come up with a solution where they can actually not only engage with the user, but actually educate them as well.
Absolutely. And you can see already consumers are pushing more towards education in general on a global scale, wanting to learn more about their health, wanting to learn more about diets. And a lot of this is due to what's happening in 2020, but nonetheless, there is that need for education. We talked about this around finance a few weeks back, around finance and banking, is there's a need for education and not just the solution as well. So you're spot on that. And Julio, last but not least, areas of opportunity before we get to closing thoughts. What else are you seeing?
Last and least, I'm telling you, I'm still in awe of the panel. Well, look, first the data, we have to make sure it occurred to me that just yesterday there was an announcement by a company called UHS that it had been hacked, and through some kind of ransomware event, which has already, it seems like hospitals are being targeted for these ransomware events because of course their data is critical and you've got people who could possibly die. And there was even a story about a patient in a German hospital a couple of weeks ago that probably died as a result of the ransomware attack. So you have to be super careful with that. But I did, as I was listening to everyone speak, I realized that there's a sixth pillar. Remember, I said there were 5 things that we looked at, but there's AI. I mean, AI is absolutely critical, and I forgot to mention Diagnose here. It's our AI company, our favorite AI company. It's a Canadian company. It already trades. Great company that has applied AI, among other things, to help cure blindness. When you're a diabetic, it turns out that you have a 4% chance of becoming blind, and you wouldn't know about that. But if you look at the retina of the eye, you will be able to detect certain patterns in the retina that would give you an advanced indication that that particular patient suffering from diabetes may in fact become blind. So it's a critical thing to try and detect, because of course you want to prevent blindness, especially of course in high diabetic countries like Mexico, which is where Diagnose is very active. So with AI, they've now figured out a way to detect those changes in the retina that are more conducive toward causing that blindness, which is really inoperable unless you attack it early on. So, I mean, one small example, but AI is, I'm all for AI, and anybody with a company in AI, whether it's health or anything else, please call us because we'd love to put you in touch with our experts, and then determine whether the company is, suitable for investment. But great area for research right now.
Absolutely. And gentlemen, we are about that time at the top of the hour here. So I want to come to each of you for your closing thoughts. And thank you so much for sharing all your insights so far today. But not only closing thoughts, but also where can everyone find you to continue the conversation? There's been a lot shared here today, and a lot of opportunity that people need to and will want to be jumping on. So Karsten, let's start with you. Any closing thoughts, and then where can everyone find you online to continue the conversation?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. So I think for our audience and investors, nobody should miss the really important thing that's happening this year, and that's gene therapy. It's been on the radar screen for a long time. but this year is when it actually hits real life in commercializing gene therapies. We're talking about children. They are 3 to 10 years old. If they suffer from Duchenne or other inherited diseases, they never get to the age of 10. Be it CRISPR, be it AAV, there's a variety, or lentiviral approaches, there's a variety of ways. But I think this is now, we're coming to a very important stage where big pharma have acquired some initial companies, but it opens up a huge opportunity. Think about the annual treatment costs that range probably between 2 million and 5 million per patient. It's an amazing thing. It's literally a half-hour therapy once in a lifetime to cure a patient. I don't think innovation in healthcare could be more disruptive than what gene therapy offers. So what's one thing to watch out, one thing to keep on your radar screen and look at it.
Wonderful. And where can everyone find you online to continue the conversation?
You can find me on Twitter, Carsten_Thiel, anytime. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Raghu, to you. Quick closing thoughts. Where can everyone find you?
Yes, I think because of the democratization that's happened, because of this remote access and kind of general awareness of areas like infectious diseases, which are not popular before, I would think that there are opportunities that were not available before, which are kind of global now, especially in biotech, which used to be a little more restricted before. So I would look at, for instance, to take an example, diabetes, which is a huge, population that's affected, 100 million plus. We don't really, it's still like certain things are unmet needs, like for instance, the peripheral neuropathy, which requires in severe cases, amputation, and things like that. Not much is going on in the big pharma in these spaces. So there is opportunities for a lot of startups to address some of these large problems, which, cancer and some of these are more sexy, if you will, but there are a lot of other areas where I think there's opportunity. So if you're an entrepreneur, I think this is a great time. Unfortunately, these kind of disruptions, happen, but they also provide the opportunity. So I would, look and have people look carefully for what opportunities are available now that, these transformations have happened. And you can reach me on LinkedIn. It's my first name, middle initial S like Sam, and then last name. So Raghu S. Rao on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Thank you as well. Julio, quick closing thoughts, and then where can everyone find you online?
Well, it's easy to find us at New York Bay Capital, nybaycapital.com, Julio at nybaycapital.com. Look, no real closing thoughts. It's a very exciting field. It's a good time to be in medicine. Changes afoot finally, perhaps because of the influence of COVID and other things. So some things that should have happened before are already happening, and a lot of things that we have heard about, whether it's stem cells or whether it's AI, whatever, they're finally coming to fruition. So exciting times to be in the business. It's exciting times to be investing in the business. And here's to having New York all crowded again in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Julio. Devang, to you, quick closing thoughts, and then where can everyone find you online?
Sure, thanks. So I think the rapid digitization that we've seen in the last months is already manifesting itself in a lot of growth in digital pathology, which is a big area of interest for us, both from an investing and advisory standpoint. I think any area which is human intensive and error prone will encounter gales of destruction, to use a phrase from Schumpeter. And then I think, as Raghu said, cancer will always remain interesting. I think within cancer, there's a lot of focus on immuno-oncology and genomics, obviously, again, data-driven. And big pharma will continue to outsource R&D for the large part. I think there's lots of areas for startups to fill those gaps in product roadmaps of big pharma companies with their offerings. And genomic subset of cancer used for many areas that will undergo rapid growth. Yeah, and I think in the India context, if the audience is there's always areas where you could be resourceful to grow rapidly. There's many areas like one that I spoke about briefly, opening kiosks or adjacencies to oncology where you might not have the deepest pedigree or the most storied PhDs on your team, but there's a lot of areas where you can execute well and build successful businesses.
Wonderful.
And you can find me on LinkedIn. Sorry, Devang Mehta at Anthill Ventures, and I typed in the URL. Sorry, in the chat box.
Awesome. No, you called me before I had to ask, so it's perfect. Last but not least, the man of the hour, Anuj, close this out. Closing thoughts. Where can everyone find you?
Thanks, Mike. So, I mean, you've heard me say this before. The last 6 months has been time machine. We are living in a phase where, if you would have told me in January that public schools will have their classes over the internet, I would have said, no way, mate. That's not going to happen in the next 10 years. If you would have told me doctors will be consulting patients over video calls, I would have said, no way, that's not happening for the next 10 years. So we are living in a time machine right now. The last 6 months have proven to be a phase where now we will be constantly switching between a pre-2020 timeline and a post-2020 timeline. If you are a startup, you gotta make sure that you are living in the present, you are keeping the 2019 world in the mind, but at the same time, you gotta think 2020, 2025, and 2030 in the mind. And only then you can survive, and only then you can grow in the market. If you are a MedTech company, please do reach out to us. You can find me on atutum.com. That's atutum.com. So email me, anuj@atutum.com, or look me up on LinkedIn. It'll be pretty easy to find me.
Wonderful. And thank you all again so much for your thoughts and insights today. You, our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, click subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Do reach out if you'd like to be on a show like today as an investor to share your thoughts and insights. Thank you, Julio. Or if you'd like to be an entrepreneur to pitch us your latest company, product, or service, and our live audience, again, do reach out to the LA Token team and or myself. Thank you, Devang. And with that, again, thank you all to our investors for sharing their thoughts and insights, into the entire LA Token team, along with Emmanuel, for making VCTV possible every single day. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. We're going to take a quick short break, and we'll be back here with more VCTV and talking about the latest in investments in general, where things are, where things are not going in terms of fundraising, not just here in 2020 and that last few months of the sprint to the end of the year, but what's to come ahead. And we'll be back here in just a short little break. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.